The NFL draft might be the most stressful day or set of days in any player's life. You have no idea where you're going to go or if you're going to get drafted at all. Your entire life's work comes down to these few days, and it's completely out of your control, and there's nothing you can do in the moment to change the outcome. With every second that passes, you lose a ton of money on your contract. With every second that passes, your odds of playing football professionally diminish, and you go from potentially getting to play a game for a living to having to look for another line of work. You think you're going to be living the rest of your life in one city, and then it's a different city. And especially back in the 1970s, when the NFL draft was not televised, when mock drafts really didn't exist, when everything was a complete crapshoot in terms of where players would go outside of the very best of the bunch, and when information in the sports realm was scarce, it was extremely stressful. At least now, generally speaking, you have an idea of what's going to happen with the draft. Even if you have no idea where you're going, you know what point of the draft you're on, because you can check your phone or turn on ESPN. But back in the day, you just had to sit around and wait and hope for the best. Until you got that phone call, you were completely in the dark and had no idea what was happening. And I bring all of that up because the man you've been watching this entire time is tight end Mike Barber. Entering the 1976 NFL draft, there seemed to be few tight ends in the collegiate ranks who were better than this man right here out of Louisiana Tech, as his 6 touchdown catches in 1975 led the entire Southland Conference, as did his incredible 23.1 yards per reception. Barber was an All-Southland Conference selection in both 1974 and 1975 with the Bulldogs, and in 1973, even caught the longest touchdown pass in Louisiana Tech history, a record that still stands to this day. The man was a great tight end, and was projected to be one of the first tight ends taken at the 1976 NFL Draft. But while catching a football was a strength of his, patience was most definitely not a strength. In fact, I don't think Mike Barber ever heard of the phrase patience is a virtue, because what transpired on draft day in 1976 is one of the weirdest stories and moments of a player getting drafted. And half a century later, it deserves a deep dive today. Because this is the story behind the bizarre NFL draft saga of Mike Barber, and the tight end who actually had more problems to worry about after he got drafted than he did before he got drafted. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping up the video, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that Mike Barber was losing his hair. But before I get into what exactly happened with Barber, we need some context to understand the big change that was made with the NFL draft in 1976, because it will help understand why patience might have been running thinner than normal. And the big change with the draft in 1976 was that it got moved to April. Usually, the draft was held in late January and early February. The 1975 NFL draft the year before was held on January 28th and January 29th. It was very much like the NBA and the NHL, where the draft happened almost immediately after the conclusion of the playoffs. However, because of a bunch of legal troubles regarding the expansion teams that might be worth a future video, with the legal troubles jeopardizing the entire future of the draft in general, the draft was delayed a couple of months, and eventually, the NFL got the go-ahead to hold its draft starting on April 8th. So the wait for these prospects to figure out where they were going to go and whether they'd have a life as professional football players was going to be a lot longer. Imagine if you're set to do something on the first day of summer vacation, and it gets delayed to the first week that you're back in school. That's kind of what this was like. So already, you had some players on edge, and Barber made it very clear that he couldn't wait for draft day to come to find out where he was going. As Barber said before the draft, "I've waited so long, it seems unreal. I've waited so long, and now it's just around the corner." We knew that Barber was going to get drafted relatively high. Benny Cunningham, the Clemson tight end who was a consensus All-American selection in 1974, was the top tight end on the board. But of the few draft experts that existed back in 1976, they all seemed to have Barber at number 2, or no worse than the top 5. So the draft was going to start at 10 o'clock Eastern on April 8th. And at some point during the day, Barber was going to know where he was going to start his professional football career. However, as the draft continued and Barber was in his duplex waiting for the phone to ring, all Barber heard was silence. Time kept passing. Players kept getting picked, and not one of them was Barber. Benny Cunningham was chosen by the Pittsburgh Steelers at the end of the first round, but no tight ends had been taken since. And finally, the phone rang. Could this be a team wanting to take Barber and make him an NFL player? Could this be the moment that Barber's dreams finally get realized and all of his hard work pays off? Well, not quite. Because this phone call came from a friend, and the friend thought that this was the appropriate time to play a practical joke on him and give him a prank call. Why the friend thought this, I have no idea. However, the friend told him that the draft was in the 4th round already, and you still haven't been picked up by any team. And at this point, Barber was furious. 3 rounds had gone by, and he hadn't been taken yet? He thought he'd be long gone by this point. If you get taken outside the first 3 rounds, your contract is significantly less, and you've got an uphill battle to make it onto the roster. He already had to wait an extra 2 months to hear his name called, like every other prospect for the draft that year. And now, we were in round 4, and all of the so-called experts were wrong, and he was still waiting and losing out on tons of money and opportunities? So that's when Barber, with a ton of pent-up frustration and not really thinking all that well, decided to let it all out. He slammed the phone down, wound up, and sent a fist through his wall. The wall in his duplex? Completely destroyed. Mike Barber thought he'd be celebrating by this point, and instead, he was now staring at a duplex that was destroyed with a giant fist in the wall. Maybe not the best way to relieve your anger, but you could tell that Barber's fist had the fury of 1,000 suns. Which is what makes it incredible when the moment after Barber sent his fist through the wall and basically destroyed his duplex, turning that room into a giant rage room, he got another phone call. This phone call was from the Houston Oilers, as in the team you've been watching him with this entire time. And this phone call was 100% legit. Barber was now an Oiler. Oh, and that thing that his friend told him about the 4th round and the prank call? Turns out, that wasn't even remotely true. We were still well in the 2nd round, and Barber was taken by the Oilers with pick number 48. And look, on one hand, I completely get Barber's frustration thinking that we were in the 4th round and his name hadn't been called yet. Time can move incredibly slowly if you're waiting for something. If you're waiting for something to start, or you're waiting to leave school because you've got something fun planned, or you just want to get out of here, it can be the slowest time of your life, and every second can feel like an hour. Plus, this was 1976 that we were talking about. Maybe you get the occasional update on the radio of how the draft was going, but you couldn't turn on the TV and see where you were in the draft. especially since ESPN didn't even exist back then. You couldn't go on your computer or your smartphone and check where we were in the draft. This was the biggest day of Barber's life, and it's easy to give him a pass for this, considering the technological limitations at the time. On the other hand, if we think about this for more than 5 seconds, Mike Barber might legitimately be the worst person in the world at telling time. Like, how could you possibly think that the draft was in the 4th round by this point? Clocks still existed in 1976. The draft started at 10 a.m. Eastern. We knew that the draft was starting at that time. Every draft, when it comes to how long it takes to make the picks, is practically the same with little variation. The first 2 rounds usually take 3.5 hours to complete each. And in 1976, this was no exception, as round 1 took 3 hours and 37 minutes, while round 2 took 3 hours and 24 minutes. And I'm sure Barber had people tell him that too. This means that the first 2 rounds of the 1976 NFL draft, just like basically every other draft since the merger, took 7 hours combined. This was not at an abnormally slow pace or an unusually fast pace. This was right in line with every other draft. And seeing as Barber was picked with pick number 48, we can assume that he was chosen roughly 5.5 hours into the draft. If we were in the 4th round, seeing as there were 92 picks in the first 3 rounds, it would have meant that each pick took about 3.5 minutes to make, which would shatter every record in the book by a ton. With the pace of literally every draft since the merger before this, round 4 was going to start when the sun was down. So even if you didn't know exactly what pick we were on, all you had to do was look outside your window and see whether the sun was out or not. If the sun was still out, guess what? We're probably not in the 4th round at this point. In other words, Mike Barber destroyed his duplex and threw a fit of rage because he had no idea how to tell time. I'll put it this way. Imagine it's 2:10 Eastern Time, and you know that your favorite team is playing a game at 1 o'clock. You have to miss the first hour or so because there's some function you have to be at, but you'll be back by 2:10 and you're going to catch the rest of the game. What time would you say the game is at? You're probably thinking the 2-minute warning of the first half or somewhere around that. Whether it's a minute to go, 4 minutes to go, basically, you can guess with reasonable confidence where you are at a certain point just by looking at the clock, even if you're not watching the event. Well, Mike Barber would have thought that he would miss the entire game, and that by the time he got back, that the game would be over. That's how gross of a miscalculation of time this was. We're not talking the man thought it was pick 51, and in actuality, it was pick number 48. We're talking about a man who thought we were in the hundreds, and we hadn't even left the top 50 yet. Plus, how would his friend know where the draft was at? But he wouldn't, nor would his agent. Nothing about this story adds up with Mike Barber. He was stressed out and forgot how to think as a result of this. So the good news for Barber was that he was drafted by the Houston Oilers in round 2. The bad news, aside from the fact that he was outed as a man who couldn't tell time, was that his duplex was destroyed. And what should have been a celebratory moment that was the culmination of Barber's life work was now a moment of, oh crap, what the heck do I do now? Because the first call he made after he got drafted was to his dad, who conveniently enough happened to be a painter. And he didn't talk to his dad about getting drafted. As Barber said, I had to quick get on the phone with my daddy, and I said, get over here quick. We got some work to do on this wall. So that was how Mike Barber spent his draft day, fixing and repairing the wall that he destroyed because he thought we were in the 4th round of the NFL draft when we were still in the middle of the 2nd round which everyone except for Barber seemed to know or have a pretty good idea about. Not exactly the way Barber was expecting to spend draft day, if I do say so myself. Fortunately for Barber, he was a lot better at playing football than he was at telling time, as you could probably tell from these highlights. Barber ended up playing 10 seasons in the NFL, and in 1980 was an instrumental part in guiding the Oilers to the playoffs, when he caught 59 passes for 712 yards and 5 touchdowns, making him one of the most productive tight ends in football that year from a pass-catching standpoint. In fact, in 1980, with the exception of future Hall of Fame tight end Kellen Winslow, Mike Barber had more receptions than any tight end in football. The man could play, and his 2 receiving touchdowns in the second quarter of the 1978 divisional round game against the New England Patriots were instrumental in setting the Oilers to their first AFC Championship game appearance in franchise history. But while he was a really good player on the field, a really good teller of time off the field, he was most definitely not. So as a word of advice to any prospects watching this video for whatever crazy reason, don't get upset about getting snubbed in the draft without actually knowing where you are in the draft. If it's Saturday and we're 1 hour into the draft on day 3, and you're angry because you think it's the 7th round, then you should probably redirect your anger somewhere else and your energy somewhere else. And you should learn how to tell time. And if you're the kind of prospect that gets irritable and antsy and wants to rage when something doesn't go your way, find a better outlet than slamming and potentially breaking your fist through the wall of your duplex and destroying your dwelling. No reason to risk your professional career before it even starts and mangle up your hands, especially if your job is to catch the football. Because while Mike Barber could cut it on the field, he couldn't cut it when it came to telling time. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name of the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.